Okay, so I will talk about the consensus meter, about its rationale mainly, and also about the formula itself, and I will show some, not this, 1 second. Yes. And also I will share some simulation of this algorithm. So intro to the consensus meter of Consenz. So the main problem or the main challenge is this is aimed to solve is how we can create and encourage decentralized governance, decision-making processes, discussions, etc., that are both productive, not just discussion for discussion, but there is a product that can be used for decision-making. And for as a tool for the community to gather around what are the processes and the ways that we are doing things in a way that been built by the old community. A process that is structured and not chaotic, and is focused on the issues that are relevant to the community and not spread around too many issues. While it is also engaging and scalable, in a scalable way that many people, when we do talk about large numbers and the potentials of participants in these processes, it should be also open and accessible. If it will be only technically scalable, it is not enough. We also need all the time to think about the user experience and how the process and the tools are accessible for the community and for people from different backgrounds, and it's dynamic. It can adjust itself to the changing reality and to different values that the members can bring with them, and to take into account that community is something that is evolving as in constant change, and also the reality. And if we create a governance system, it should consider this as well. So I'm looking at two main decision-making methods, we can call it. The one is voting, and the other discussion. And I think this is the main ways of groups of people to get decision made. And for both of them, and for each of them, there is the pros and the cons, okay? When we talk about a vote, we're talking about an event. It can be reoccurring, but it is an event that is limited in time, while discussion is a process that can be ongoing. In a vote, we can choose from a few closed options. If it is to choose a person for some role, or if it is to choose which project will be funded, or other options that we need to choose from, while in discussion, it is open for solutions that cannot be taken into account at the beginning of the process. There is a place for creative thinking. In a vote, usually there are clear rules to determine which side is the winning. If it is majority, if it other formula, but when we are dealing with numbers of votes this way or another, it is easy to set the rules. While in discussion, can be an open conversation. Sometimes, and most of the time, the rules are vague, if any at all. If there is a process with an endpoint in a discussion, it's very rare. And vote is scalable. It's scalable because because we're working with numbers, and we have the ability to treat votes in very large numbers, while discussion is unscalable. In discussion, we need to put attention and time for every participant opportunity to share their idea and their perspective. And as the group that are taking an active part in the discussion grows, so is the time that is needed. So, and at a certain point, it cannot be handled, and it cannot scale any longer. So we're looking for a way to combine the advantage of both methods into one process. So let's start with the product. We wish to create a product that is, we focused on a document. The document, as we see it, can be a product of a governance process that can hold a complex idea. It is not just an idea. It can take into account many aspects of the issues that we need to deal with. And we can see that societies are gathering around the documents. In this three example, we have the American the Constitution. I think one of the most famous governance document in the world and one of the most influencer. We have the Hammurabi laws, where we can see that even 1,000 years ago, people gathered around written text. And we have the Israeli Declaration of Independence. This is also considered to be very canonical text in the Israeli governance tradition. Mm-hmm. So the way that we approach this problem is to look what will be our input and what will be our output. So as an output, as we said, we wish to create a document. We wish to create a document in a centralized way, in an open way, in a way that this document represents the agreements of the people, the group that has been participated in creating it. And to create this, we need edit suggestion. We create a document by editing it, and in edit suggestion, I mean also a new text to the document, but also changing the text, existing text of the document. And edit suggestion can come with comments and with the discussion aspect. This is the unscalable input in such manner that it is textual. It requires attention, but this is the raw material that will create the agreement, the document agreement. To set the rules of which edit suggestion is being accepted, it's been approved, and is being part of the document that's being built by the community, we need to set an approval threshold for edit suggestion to decide which edit is approved and which is not. And for that, we can use the voting mechanism. So by that, we can combine both the discussions that is open, that is creative, that is inviting many people to share their idea and thinking, with the voting that can be scalable and can be used by large numbers of participants. Yeah. So this is in a very general way how we determine this threshold by using what we call the consensus mean. So at the beginning of the process, the initial threshold is some constant. You can call it X. Usually we use the number 2. It's like, because when the process begins, there is the one that publish the edit suggestion, and we expect another person to support, at least another person to support this suggestion in order to it to be an agreement document and not just a document that's created by one person. Now, the edit suggestion can change from on a vote status to be approved and to be part of the agreement draft when the supported delta, which means the pro voter minus the con voters, is reaching the threshold. So we have a certain number, this is the threshold. When there is enough supporters for it to reach the threshold, then the suggestion becomes part of the document, part of the product of the process. And every time a new suggestion is being edited, it's been added to the document, and we consider it as a status change of the document itself, then the threshold should be updated. And it's done by adding a consensus meter value of the specific suggestion to the area of the whole document or agreement consensus meter. And this value is determined by this formula of 1 minus con voter count divided by the pro voter count, multiplied by the pro voters divided by the document user count. So, and by that we are using the voting as one number to take into consideration, and the whole participant of the process as another, because not all the participants will vote on all of the suggestions, but we do want to count them as part of the process, and this is why the document user count is part of this formula. And when the document consensus meter is an average of all the suggestions, approved suggestion consensus meter, and this formula give us an input of a number between 0 to 1. So we multiply this number, this value, with the number of participants in the document in the given time of the last change in the document, and this determine the threshold for all new and existing proposal suggestions that are still on a vote. And by that, the threshold is always dynamic. It always taking into account how many participants there are in the process, so that we can start with a small group, and it can be grow during the process. It can be also limited if needed, and we take always into consideration how many people support this specific version. So even if you in a minority vote, and you voted against some suggestions that being approved, and it's part of the document, you still have influence, because now it will be easier to change the document in the future.
So let's pause there for a moment, see if this is understood by the group. So you have kind of two processes going on at the same time. You have the process of approval, in which you have to exceed a threshold, but then you also have the threshold being adaptive. And let me ask this question. If the threshold was just some percentage of support, would that be different from what you're doing here? Or I'm not clear how the adaptation works. And I'm wondering whether there's some simpler definition that's actually equivalent to what you've outlined here.
It could be. I will be happy to look into it if there is something more simple.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure about it, but
well, maybe that's just a general question too. Like, I know, and Omar can kind of either agree or disagree with this, but in my own work with complex systems, one of the things that's really struck me is that you're trying to simplify the model of complex systems so that you have some insight that can help you penetrate through the complexity. So what you've outlined here looks quite interesting, but Omar or Avaran might want to take a look at this whole process and see if there's a simpler definition that is either equivalent or very close to achieving what's outlined here.
It could be, but for your question about a simple percentage, the question is percentage of what? So we need to take into consideration both let's compare it to the current centralized governance systems. When we vote to elect representative for the parliament or for the Congress, so the percentage is determined by the number of all voters, but it doesn't take into consideration the citizens that did not participate in the process for different kind of reason. Here we do take into consideration the participants that are part. They can be part of the community, they can be part of the process, but they did not take an active part in the specific voting of the specific suggestion. And also, I also want to take, and this is, I think, I will go here. I also want to allow a process that is it's on the spectrum of between completely to be dynamic, or and the opposite side of it of structured. Or if I show it in the negative way, it's not chaotic. It's dynamic but not chaotic. It's structured, but it is not frozen. So the consensus meter, it is always taking into consideration how much consensus the current draft of the agreement achieved by the voting. So as it is more in the consensus, the consensus meter will tend more into one, and then it will be harder to change the document because you need to recruit more support from the current participant, or to recruit or to add new participant to the process. And as it will be less in the consensus and less supported by the community, the meter will go more to one, and then the document will be more dynamic. So in this case, we always have a product that represents the agreement. But it doesn't have to be in full consensus. It doesn't have to be in a majority consensus in order to be for the community to look at this document and say, okay, this is what you can agree upon right now. Let's use it as for the needs of our governance. Is it maybe now the needs of this formula are more understood?
Well, this is helpful too, because one, that's a nice property in the sense I think of it as like a hysteresis process where you might want to make it fairly easy to create new documents, but then once the community comes to kind of some agreement about a particular form of a document, you then want to make it harder for that document to be changed. You know, so for instance, like you referred to the US Constitution, there's almost like three aspects to it. There's the original articles of the Constitution, which basically, to my knowledge, I don't think they've ever been changed. Maybe they have been. But then you have the amendments, you know, where there's a process of amending the Constitution. And then finally you have laws, you know, that are, you know, created all the time and come and go. So yeah, that looks interesting.
Yeah, and this goes back also to the diagrams that we discussed on the white paper for the DRAP, for the democracy, of different levels, different levels of different documents. So Constitution is very high level, and maybe it should be the most stable one, and also the most engaging one if we are talking about decentralized governance. And the day-to-day processes are the most high resolution, the most low level, and they should be the most dynamic, even though only a small portion of the community is taking part.
Yeah, I see too. Right.
Okay. So this is the simulation of the formula. I hope it will be clear, but this is a simple code, so simple that I wrote it myself a few years ago. This is the only piece of code that I wrote myself in this project. So this is only try to bring the numbers. So this is simulations that always bring more participants to the process and determine randomly if they are a supporter, objective of a specific suggestion, or just participants that did not vote. So you can see we start with small numbers, one pro, 0 con, every user, and the threshold, the consensus meter stays on 1 at the beginning. And then it became more and more complicated for this specific suggestion because there are already 4 more users than and only 1 vote. So you see that it's 0.33 for the consensus meter, and then the whole document consensus meter reduced from 1 to 0.86, and then it goes, and mainly I wish to see to show that even in large number, if I go to the end of the simulation, even in large number, when we are talking about tens of thousands of people participate in the process, we still have a reasonable threshold. So when we have almost 13,000 participants, we have little less than 9,000 people in the threshold needed, a threshold of 9,000 for acceptance, and the consensus meter is 0.69. You also can see the pattern of when we start with one consensus meter and it reduces and reduces, but then it can grow back again. So you can see some kind of a pattern that we start with complete consensus because the group is very, very small. As the group grows, there are more ideas, more opinion, and more perspectives, so the consensus go down. But as the process continue and people bring a compromise or some new creative ideas to the process and get the approval of the other participant, you can see the consensus go back up. And this is also something that I would be happy to show in a concrete number. Right now, it's still an assumption that maybe to be validated. But it is complicated. I'm aware of it. But from the user experience and from the use of the platform, it can be simple. User can just come in and vote, and this is something that I realized in many times that I pitched Consenz for all kind of groups. I always thought that people when they will see, do you see this the other screen right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When people, this is a mock-up of a Consenz screen. When people will see this acceptance bar and the voting, they will ask, how is it calculated? And I was surprised to realize that not everybody is really interested in behind the scenes. So it should be, of course, completely open and completely transparent. But if it is okay, if it is a little bit too complicated for everybody to understand it, as long as the user experience is simple. And the user experience is simple because in the aspect of the user can interact just by voting. They can come in, see something that they have opinion on. They can vote for or against, and by that they influence the process. And they do not need to take a multiple choice. They do not need to grade the different options in between 0 to 10 or between 0 to 5 or other complex systems that are good for other processes. It is binary. You can say just if you like it, you don't like it, and the aggregating all of this input while screening the text input that cannot be scaled can bring us to the objective of creating a product to a governance process that in a scalable manner. Something else? I think that's it.
Aaron, I think that I agree that for most of the users, the UX part of it is going to be good enough. However, I think when dealing with Cardano and Catalyst, and from what I hear, I think that they would like to know how the threshold is being calculated, and I think that it's going to be part of their experience using the system. It's going to be a way for them to trust, to know that they can trust the system. So I think that if they're the audience right now, then in my opinion, it should be a goal to simplify things. It's not necessarily the case with other users and with other communities, but I think that it is the case with that specific community.
The other thing I would add to it, and maybe this is where Amar's skills could come in, is, since I've been working in these governance processes, I've become a lot more aware of the importance of this bonds-off power index, because however we set up a voting system, we have this intuition that the number of votes you control is kind of the way you think about the power. But it turns out that that's not really true, that the appropriate way to think about the power in a community is your ability, how often you're a decisive voter who makes a change from whether a document, for instance, is approved or disapproved. And that calculation is kind of subtle, but it's quite important. So I don't know how far you want to go with the analysis of this, but some kind of power index analysis of the way power is distributed in the community and how this adaptive threshold affects that might be worth taking a look into. And then might also then give you some insights as to whether you have this adaptive threshold working the way you want it to work.
Yeah, for sure. To create some measurable way to make sure that this formula really works for the benefit and in a way that can create trust in the community is very important. And the bands of metric, how it's called, can be maybe one of the models to apply. Maybe will be the one, because it was really, I just learned about it. Maybe later on we'll be about it. But it is very good one to create trust and to create engagement as well, because the participants want to know that they can influence. And they are not
now. Right now, are you thinking of, in terms of how you distribute votes, are you thinking about it in a democratic process or one vote process, or what are you thinking about in terms of how people would engage with this voting process?
Well, I see it as one of the building blocks of a diverse governance system. So we can use this specific algorithm with different voting influence power according to the needs. So the same algorithm can be applied on coin voting that depends on the holding and the stakes that you have in the system. And the same one can apply on a reputation token, and the same one can apply on one person, one vote system.
Yeah.
So this, and by that you can create different building blocks for diverse governance system.
And just for some background, when you look at sort of one coin, one vote model, that's kind of an ownership model. Then that's sort of one extreme of voting processes. And then if you look at a democratic process where it's one person, one vote, that's sort of the opposite extreme. And then it turns out that there are a whole variety of potential weightings of the votes in between those two extremes. And the one that's caught the most attention is a process known as quadratic voting, where you are represented by holding a coin or a certain number of votes, but you have to expend those votes quadratically in order to actually, well, maybe the best way to think about it is you have to spend your coins quadratically in order to receive a particular number of votes. And that turns out to be kind of a balance between these two extremes that has some advantages.
So the vote weighting is one side, and the decision making, the threshold is another one, and
exactly
combine. And then we can use also quadratic voting, square root voting, and it can be a great playground for different experiments. So if I hope that very soon, we are talking about, I hope till the end of the year, that Consenz will be the platform itself will be start to be used by the community for different purposes, and then we don't need to wait until the end of to the governance phase of every funding round to calculate and to check the different methods of voting and decision making. We can do it ongoing. Keep iterating and keep researching on a real use case by using this platform for this research, for this study.
Yeah. All right. I have another meeting coming up, and so maybe we could take about 5 more minutes and try to define some action items for next steps.
Yeah, exactly. So I will send you the presentation and the data on it, and I think first, as you said, I agree that simplifying the formula will be good. I hope maybe it is possible. I don't know. Just to keep in mind the goals and the reason for these specific formulas that I choose, but
yeah, in fact, maybe that could be one action item either for Varan or Amar. Maybe even if you can just take what he's written and put it into kind of a mathematical structure. And that way it might be easier to review exactly what the formula is. And then once we have the formula, maybe we'll have some insight about an easier way to express it. I don't know if that's going to be true, but if some, once it's in a mathematical structure, then you can kind of simplify the equations and also look for equivalences that maybe gives you a different interpretation of what the formula is doing.
And also, Aviran, you will need to code it in a few weeks, I hope.
Yeah, well, in fact, I'm curious, was that just pseudocode or that you showed, or is that a particular language that you prototyped it in?
This specific I wrote in very simple JavaScript platform, but this algorithm has been used by real users in the proof of concept phase that we done on the prototype version of Consenz in between 2018 and 2020.
Maybe another question is, are there any references for how you created the formula? Did you create the formula yourself, or was there a particular reference that you followed?
I don't remember a specific reference.
Okay.
If we can find some literature to support it, it will be great.
Yeah. Okay.
But I did it, as I said, intuitively, just looking out what should be the input, what should be the output, and how can we go from one side to the other. But yes, by formulating it, maybe we can also find some literature that can be support or denied.
Yeah. Okay, excellent.
Okay. So I will send you all the presentation. Please tell me if something is not clear, if there are some more materials and information that I can provide for this mission, and if we can continue, we will set the meeting maybe for 2 weeks from now. No,
that sounds good.
Once a month.
Yeah, sure, that'll work.
Okay, so and then we can discuss of the ways that we can simplify it and formalize it as the next step.
Okay, excellent. All right, this is great. It's a really interesting work. Glad to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Henrik.
Okay.
Goodbye for now.
Very nice to meet you all.
Goodbye.
You too.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye bye. Take care.